What's up, everybody? I'll at least try to get something out this week that's hopefully a little entertaining or thought provoking. Lately, I've mainly done nuts and bolts history kind of videos and passed on the more philosophical side of things. But screw it, why not? If you guys want to listen, you can listen. If not, okay. I probably won't spend 6 hours editing, so there's a fresh image every 10 seconds. But I stumbled across this old Soviet propaganda cartoon this morning, and it has a deeper insight than just about anything you'll see out there in the world today. And everybody's so distracted with imagined problems that nobody even knows where to begin with the real problems. And there are too many to list. For every solution you come up with in one sector, it raises 10 more questions in another. But just like problems in your own personal life, if you can't isolate one single problem area and identify it as a problem area, then you can't find a solution to it because you don't even know what the problem is. And I'm sure half my viewers just now said, oh, it's going to be one of those videos. Bye. So this cartoon is direct and to the point about a problem that we have with capitalism. And until we identify that capitalism isn't a perfect system, then we can't fix it. Now, does that mean I'm promoting communism and Marxism? No. For anybody that is, let me point you to the Utopian Mouse study and plenty other just like it. What I'm doing is acknowledging that unabated capitalism creates monsters. And the whole point of the federal government should be reining in what megalomaniacs can and can't do to this society, as opposed to average Joes that just get up and want to feed their kids and have a roof over their head. Not everybody has that ruthless desire to conquer all of their competitors. Most people just want to earn an honest buck and live their lives. We wouldn't have this modern society that we live in if it wasn't for the rewards for your effort system of capitalism that we have. But some ideas are so big that it's going to end up in the hands of everybody in the country, which makes a small handful of people very rich and powerful. Every generation since the late 1800s has had these megalomaniacs. This cartoon correctly identifies what happens in a scenario like that. So there, we've identified one of the many problems in this world, and it's not an incomprehensible dilemma. If you watch to the end of the video, I'll actually offer a simple, logical solution. The people that actually watch my whole video know that it takes me 15 minutes to make a point. So here's the cartoon, finally. Rich old lady and her dog are cruising down the road. They get into an accident. She dead, and doesn't she look like a lovely person? And this is about how an heiress actually looked back in the 50s. But nowadays, heiresses look like this because there's plenty of gold diggers and rich guys that just want a trophy wife. But the whole family is gathered around to see who's inheriting everything, and the butler sits down on the dog and kicks him out of his chair. Ruckus won't even let me do that. He doesn't have that killer look in his eye right now because he knows I ain't gonna do shit. But the butler's mean to the dog, and wouldn't you know it, the old lady left everything to the dog. And the bulldog is a great analogy of who you might be passing all this power on to back in the 1950s, and maybe a few people today, but for the most part, most of these kids are really soft today and more likely to pick up an addiction. But I can name one heir today that has that history book potential, and not in a good way. I'm not going to. So then you see him being pampered in every way possible, waited on hand and foot. He goes out to a nightclub and has a few drinks, dances like a fool, and of course everybody loves it. So the next thing you know, everybody's kissing his butt, doing the doggy waltz. And now he's a big man on the town. Hasn't done a damn thing to earn it, but he's there. Of course, he's too cool now to hang out with the old dogs that he used to play with, because now he's the big dog among fat cats sitting at the head of the table, CEO of the company. And I'm going to point out how stupid this is right here. All of those other men sitting at that table helped his father get that company where it is today. While in today's reality, Puppy Boy was out on his yacht in Ibiza, getting a PhD in ketamine at 3 a.m. And honestly, this has been a flaw in the system since the beginning of time with kings and princes. You would have the whole king's court, or in this case, the members of the board that knew how to handle their business inside and out. And now they have to answer to a kid that up until 15 minutes earlier didn't even know what they produced. But these are the standards that we accept in this society. Well, he's his son, so he can have everything that his dad had. Well, here in a little bit, I'm going to argue the wisdom of that. Well, wouldn't you know it, in this cartoon, he inherits an arms manufacturing company. Post-World War II, this was the most lucrative industry there was, and it's got to still be up there in the top 10. Well, the people want peace, And yes, this is Soviet propaganda, but it's true on both sides. Poor men die for rich men's quarrels. So now, to keep this racket going, you got to get out there and propagandize the people. You got to make them understand they want you in chains, babies thrown out of incubators, and the whole nine. So now, if we want to keep this arms business growing, which everything always has to grow, that's our idea of growth in this world. Not spiritual growth or growth as humanity, but always growth in dollars. So to make sure the dollars keep flowing to the munitions factory is probably going to behoove him to buy as much newspaper stock as possible. That way, day in, day out, everybody can be reassured that if we don't drop 15 tons of munitions daily, then you're going to be in chains. So now the newspapers make Puppy Boy out to be a real leader of men, someone to be respected and idolized instead of pitied and despised. We've been losing as a society ever since we started thinking that the sword maker is more important than the bread baker. So now, this person that nobody really knows anything about other than that his daddy had money is elected to the Senate and makes decisions for the entire country. Well, what kind of foreign affairs decisions do you think a man will make when every dollar spent on armaments goes directly in his pocket? Well, yeah, he's going to be standing on piles of cash, while the poor man is standing on piles of bodies. But it ain't his son, so you think he gives a fuck? You know, there's more honesty in this stupid cartoon than I've seen whole networks put out in the last 20 years. We live in such a fantasy world, the only part of this whole story you would have heard about was this stupid dance he came up with. At least in the 50s, they'd have told you who's making the bombs. Now this would all be hidden in a shell corporation 6 people removed from the actual owner. And the media's main job in this scenario would be to make sure that you didn't know that he had any connection to that corporation. So first thing I'm going to say is, out of any system of reward versus effort that anyone has yet dreamed up, by far I would choose capitalism. But that doesn't mean that it's perfect and that it can't be amended just like our Constitution. You know, our Constitution was the culmination of hundreds of years of European philosophy on society, and probably by about the time the ink was dry, somebody said, well, wait a minute, we forgot about a couple things. We never thought about what if this happens. So they said, well, let's amend this. It didn't say let's throw the whole thing out and start over. I don't think very many of my viewers are going to think that communism is the answer here, because I don't have that many young viewers. But a lot of young people today have been taught that that's the answer. And I'll actually concede that I think a combination of the two would be better than either one alone. But the short answer to that question is people literally starve to death when you leave it up to the collective good to produce all of the food. You have to have a system of effort versus reward in order to motivate anyone to do anything. Except for YouTube videos. People do still think that I should just make videos for them for free for no reward on my end whatsoever. Not many of you, but there were a few comments in there, and to them, I don't see any of you spending 2 or 3 hours every night after work trying to entertain me. This is just a fact of life. If there's nothing to be gained from putting your time and effort into something, then you have no motivation to actually do it. 100 years ago, America truly was the land of opportunity where a man could start out with $20 in his pocket and go on to build an empire. But those days are gone for the most part. If you're starting out with nothing, most people aren't even going to be able to buy a house without signing up 20 years of their life. And what has happened with every industry is somebody has found the most efficient, productive, profitable method of fulfilling a need and then monopolized that sector. A step above that, others have figured out if you control the financing for any given sector, then you control that sector as well. Just as an example, take the Union stockyards and Chicago slaughterhouses. There were millions and millions of people living on the East Coast, and people like to eat. Meanwhile, Union soldiers had killed off all of the bison west of the Mississippi, which made for prime grazing grounds for cattle. None of this is by coincidence. That's why it's called the Union stockyards. So they would graze cattle down in Texas and then drive them up to the nearest railway and ship them up to Chicago for slaughter. One of the men behind all of this was Philip Danforth Armour of Armour Meats, which you've all heard of, which we don't think twice about now, but all of this was utilizing new technologies of the time. This company helped to innovate the refrigerated train car, which is harder than one would think. And then, as it would turn out, the refrigeration technology would make the canning technology obsolete. But a long story short, They innovated technology where you could grow your food in one part of the country and ship it to another part of the country where people needed it. So now the descendants of this man, in one way or another, are going to make a small profit off of every meal that you eat. Now, you can do this with every major industry out there, boil it down to one or two families that pretty well rule all of it. You had Cornelius Vanderbilt dominate the railroad sector, which Carnegie produced all the steel for, which made them very rich. Rockefeller and his oil, which at one time had to be shipped on that railroad. So all of these innovations are contingent on other innovations, and then somebody's out there trying to dominate that field. It's a giant game of the Highlander. There will be only one. This game has continued on for every new generation with every new technology that comes out. The only generation that didn't see this was 1950s to 1990s. There was nothing big coming out because it was all Cold War armaments. One more thing, and I'll try to make a point here. Everybody knows that J.D. Rock was the richest man in America at one time. Do you know who was the richest man after him? Andrew Carnegie, founder of U.S. Steel. More importantly, though, is do you know who made him the richest man in America? Well, that would be J.P. Morgan with his I drink a fifth of whiskey every night nose. He was the one that was able to cut a $480 million check to Carnegie. That's because his father taught him that the one industry that makes all the other industries possible is financing. So he who controls the financing controls the country. This is the American version of give me control of a nation's money supply and I care not who makes the laws. In his time, J.P. Morgan was literally more powerful than the U.S. government and was the only man in America that could bail it out. So let's see if we can make some sense out of all this. Or is this just the way of the world and we should all shut up and accept it? You know, honestly, I understand that making this video isn't going to make a damn bit of difference in this world. I'd love to go back to a time when I believed my music could influence a peaceful, truly advanced future society. I've given up on that, but I can still hope to influence someone to think for themselves even when the whole world's out there screaming, it's Tartaria, it's Tartaria. So out of what we've just covered, what can we identify as a flaw in our societal system? What's more dangerous, the guy that's making ICBMs? Or the girl running the newspaper saying we have to have these ICBMs? Or the guy that signs the check to make the ICBMs in the first place? See, this is how the real world works. There's no true or false answer here. You're not going to solve any of these problems without identifying that all three of them are a threat. But now that we've correctly identified what some of our problems are, even some dumb YouTuber that nobody's going to listen to can offer common sense, logical solutions. Number one, if you put the control of a nation's money supply into the hands of private individuals, then you've just created a private individual that can poke a king in the chest like a freshman in a locker room. You know, I honestly don't think many people today are intelligent enough to realize how intelligent the authors of our Constitution really were. They identified this problem before it even arose in our country, which really wasn't that hard to do considering they came from Europe where the banksters already had control. First and foremost, if we're ever going to escape outright totalitarianism, we have to have a monetary system that doesn't benefit the few. This can literally be as simple as a split piece of wood. These are called tally sticks, where it's just a stick with notches carved in. Each 1/8-inch notch represents $100. Each 1/2-inch notch represents $500. And then it's split in half and impossible to counterfeit. You'll never get another stick to match the wood grain perfectly here. And you can't add or take away the notches, changing the amount of it. It doesn't matter what the currency is. It only matters, can it be counterfeited? And can the supply be manipulated? If we all collectively decided that these Federal Reserve notes were worthless, which they are, and that from now on we're just going to use monopoly money, our financial system would work just as well as long as you couldn't counterfeit this monopoly money and as long as the supply was under control. So then the question is, who controls the supply? Answer, someone acting in the best interests of society, which means someone that can't benefit whether the supply goes up or down. This is why a completely unbiased Department of the State should be issuing our currency. And like I said, for every solution you come up with, you're going to identify 10 more problems. How do you create a completely unbiased State Department to do that? Well, I'm not trying to solve all the world's problems for free in one video, but I guarantee you I can sit down and suss out a solution. Solution number 2 to the world's problems. If you allow the few to control the flow of information in a society, then that information will always favor the few. And once again, the geniuses that wrote our Constitution addressed this, but couldn't even conceive of a few people controlling all of the newspapers at their time. I recently did a video on the other platform about how our press is now in control of a foreign entity. With the technology of their time, it was inconceivable that any one entity could take over all of the presses. But now the technology has changed, and this needs to change too. And the fastest way that you will ever see all of this change is if right now there's a law passed that everyone has a free and equal voice on the internet, regardless of their beliefs, and that social media companies can neither boost or suppress anyone for what they say. You guys realize that there's no more viral videos. That's a thing of the past. You can't have Joe Blow come on the internet and say common sense things that everybody's thinking and allow millions of people to all realize that they think the same thing. So the First Amendment has to be amended to account for the internet age. And the megalomedia conglomerates have to be abolished. Which ties into solution number 3, which I call the you can't take it with you clause. Let's say you come up with a technology that is indispensable in our modern society. There have been several in my lifetime: the internet, cell phones, and in times past, railroads, automobiles. These are all things that there's really no moving backwards from. Does that give any of these people the right to dictate our educational system, or medical, or any other institution? No. Well, that goes double for their kids with daddy issues. You might as well be handing all that power over to a bulldog, because they're probably going to be just as reckless and self-centered. Appendix 1 to the you can't take it with you clause is that if you've come up with an innovation that is integral to our modern way of life, that is literally a necessity to live in our modern world, cell phones, electricity, whatever, then great, get rich and get your reward for the work that you put into it. But you can't take it with you. So after that pioneer dies, then it needs to become a public utility. I have to have my car to get to work. I have to have my cell phone to do my job. You don't technically have to have electricity and running water in your house, but it's pretty standard these days. But if this is something that has become a vital part of living in the modern world, then after the first generation, see Appendix 2. Appendix 2 applies to inheritance laws. Anyone over an arbitrary amount, say $1 million, can leave 10% of their wealth to their heirs, and the rest goes into a public trust fund for the next generation coming up. Everybody deserves to have a house to live in. And it shouldn't take 20 years of wage slavery to achieve that. Everybody deserves to eat. Everybody deserves the best medical care possible. But if you want anything above and beyond that, then you have to go out and get it for yourself. Let's take Warren Buffett with a net worth of $132 billion. And let's say that we'll have 20 million kids turning 18 in the next decade. Dividing up the net worth of that one man alone would be $6,000 towards a house for each one of those kids. And that's just one man. If you did that across the board, then the basic necessities of living a dignified life could be met for every child in America. If they decide that they want anything more than a roof over their head and food on their table and to be healthy, then they have to go out and get it. But their basic needs are met, and the rich kid still gets that 10% inheritance, which still gives them a leg up in the world for no other reason than they're the offspring of someone who made a difference in the world. The truth is, a bunch of these rich people that busted their ass to get where they are in this world can't stand their spoiled kids anyway. So the point to all this isn't, hey, look at me, I've got all the solutions to the world's problems. It's that if we had fair and open dialogue, we could actually start identifying the problems that we do have and stop wasting time on imaginary problems that they just use to distract us. And that I just spent from 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. making a video that most people will only watch 5 minutes of, to the point that Ruckus is now sitting here chewing on my lighter. And it benefits me and Ruckus nothing because a few people decide what everybody can see. So if they're going to shut me down when I'm at least trying to play by their rules, I'm at least going to go down speaking my mind. So, free and equal internet and sharing of information, a monetary system that's meant to benefit society and not a few, and no more spoiled rich kids dictating how the rest of us live our lives after not doing a damn thing to get to where they're at. That'd probably be a good start. Static out.